Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov, everyone. Good morning. Lovely to see everyone. It's very funny because when we have the shur in Nitzanim, so I have faces without names, and now I have names without faces. So it would be wonderful, and no pressure, but it actually is very. I have to admit that sometimes I'm a bit embarrassed. I don't know everyone's names when I give the shir for such a long time. So Zoom is a great opportunity for me to actually connect names to faces. If it's possible, I would love to see your faces, but if not, I understand. It's whatever is good for you. Okay, so I would like to give a shiur today about Hallel, the night of Pesach. And the truth is, Hallel bichlal about Pesach is very unique. All Hallel to do with Pesach is very unique and different than all the other Hallels that we know of. And we have different types of Hallel, and they are scattered all over Pesach. One could talk not only about the uniqueness of Hallel the night of Pesach, but the uniqueness of Hallel on Pesach, because as we know, Hallel Shalem, full Hallel, is only said on Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach, and Chol HaMoed, and even Shvi Shal Pesach, as we know, is Chetzi Hallel. Without a bracha, according to Ashkenazim, according to Sefarim, there's not a major difference, but according to Ashkenazim, we don't make a bracha, which really makes it a very, very, very different type of Hallel, which of course begs the question: why is that so? I once gave a shir, if you remember, a few months ago about the discussion of Simcha b'mapalatan shel Rishaim, and we mentioned that midrash there that the Bet Yosef quotes. I'm not going to really talk today about Chetzi Hallel over Chol HaMoed and the last day. I want to focus today on the night of Pesach and the special Hallels that we say the night of Pesach. And before we explain that, let's explain what's so different. So I'm sure people are all aware that there's a big difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz with this, and this continues a pattern of shurim that I've been given the past year or two, if you recall, which is to try to touch upon minhagim that have developed here in Eretz Yisrael, and perhaps one can even see this as a pattern that as we come back to Eretz Yisrael, there are certain minhagim that have becoming minhag hamakom in Eretz Yisrael, both for Ashkenazim and Sfaradim. And Hallel and Night of Pesach is a good example. If I could, I would have a show of hands here who can tell me from their experiences in Chutz La'aretz what the minhag was in their shuls in Chutz La'aretz regarding Hallel at shul the night of Pesach. And I would not be surprised if people will tell me the following: that in the Ashkenazi communities in America, there were some who stayed behind and said Hallel, and some that left and went home. And if I'm not mistaken, and in England, if I'm not mistaken, no one says Hallel in shul. In that's what in the Ashkenazi shul. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I don't know. I've done research about this, but that's my memories. Those are my memories from living in England. If I'm mistaken, I'm happy to be corrected. I don't know, but I do know one thing: that that the minhag of Ashkenazi Jews is almost like the minhag when it comes to Hallel. Night of Pesach is like the minhag of Ashkenazi Jews regarding tefillin and Chol HaMoed. It's very similar. There are different opinions. There's machloket. There's arguments. Now, some people do this. Some people do that. It's not very clear what the minhag is. And to be honest, it's not so clear where it comes from. This minhag of saying Hallel, and that's what I want to try to touch upon. So Harold said that in Cleveland, everyone in all the shuls said Hallel in the synagogue. That's fascinating. And someone is disagreeing here. Okay, so I think we just proved our point that there's a machloket about this, what the machloket is, and different customs. And I would like to talk to try to understand where this minhag coming from, what's the reason for it, and the fact is, and again, I'm happy to be corrected that in Eretz Yisrael today, everyone says Hallel the night of Pesach in the shuls. That is all Ashkenazi shuls say Hallel bivracha, and they sing it in shul, and it's a very common, very similar to Birkat Kohanim, very similar to Tefillin L'Chol HaMoed. These are minhagim that became minhag Eretz Yisrael. And the question is really, where does this come from, this Hallel? And I have a few questions about it that I want to discuss. So, besides the Hallel that we say or don't say at shul, there's another special Hallel the night of Pesach, and of course that's the Hallel in the Haggadah. The Hallel in the Haggadah, as we know, is also a very unique Hallel. There's nothing like it throughout the whole entire year, and what makes it unique is in a few details. Detail one is it's the only Hallel, again, besides the shul Hallel, that we say at night. Hallel is always said in the day, and if you remember the Gemara even brings psukim to argue that Hallel is a mitzvah of the day. The Gemara brings psukim about Shemesh and Yom to prove that Hallel is a mitzvah that is said in the daytime. And yet, we have this Hallel in the Haggadah, which is at night. Second problem with this Hallel is that we sit down for Hallel. Here again, the Gemara discusses and brings proof that we have to say Hallel standing up, and yet the Hallel that we say in the Haggadah in our Seder night is said sitting down. What else is unique about this Hallel? That we break it up into two. Our minhag today is to start Hallel before the meal, take a break, and then continue the Hallel after the break, after we eat the food on a kos. We don't say the whole Hallel on a kos. We say some of it before the meal and part of it after the meal, which is a hefsek, which could explain the fourth difference between this Hallel and other Hallels. There's no bracha. There's no bracha for this Hallel, which may make people feel, oh, it's not a very serious Hallel because it's not a bracha. So that just shows that it's like a minhag. If it would be a real Hallel, we would give it a bracha. We'll try to challenge what I just said now. One could argue that because we do make a hefsek in the middle of the Hallel, so that's the reason why we don't make a bracha. But then, of course, the question is, so why make a hefsek, right? Why don't we just say it in one go and then make a bracha? So, like I said, the Hallel the night of Pesach is a really it's strange. Both the Hallel that we say in shul, we have no Hallel that we say at shul at night. We don't say almost like I said before. We have no Hallel at night usually, but for sure not in shul. And the Hallel in the Seder is also very unusual and very different. So let's try to understand a little bit why we say these two Hallels the night of Pesach, and perhaps certain halachic questions that come up regarding them that we'll discuss. I want to, for example, hopefully we'll bring up one question is, if you don't say Hallel in the shul, should you say it again at home with a bracha? A question that might be more relevant nowadays, wartime, and we'll try to address that question. Specifically women, by the way, specifically women, this question might be more interesting than just for men. We'll soon see why. And I would also like to maybe discuss, can you say Hallel before Tzeit HaKochavim in shul? I don't know what the minhag is really, because I grew up where I grew up in Alon Shvut. They always daven marv the night of Pesach, regular. It's Tzeit HaKochavim. As you know, there's a Tosfot in Pesachim that we're all very makpid on that teaches us that you have to start the Seder only when it gets dark, because it says Balayla, it says that you have to eat matzah at night. And the Rishonim learn, the Trumas Hadeshen learns that this is not only about the matzah, but it also includes the Kiddush. So Minhag Am Yisrael is even in countries like England, where it gets dark very late in Pesach time, we still start the Seder only when it's dark out. It would be much more convenient to start when it's earlier, when it's like we do with an early Shabbos. But as you know, we don't make an early Pesach. But theoretically, there's no reason why you can't daven Marv early. Daven Marv, you can gain at least half an hour. I imagine I would if people can raise their hand and tell me if they remember daven Marv early the night of Pesach. I would like to. Yeah, okay, great, great. That's wonderful, because I always wanted to do that, and where I live, they don't do it. And I really never understood why not. But anyway, it's a great idea. You can gain another half an hour, and the kids will be up. Okay, but not many people do that. So it's easy to say that you can daven early, Marv, before Tzeit HaKochavim. Can you say Hallel? Can you say Hallel before Tzedek Chavim the night of Pesach? So those are the two questions I want to ask. That will hopefully be discussed in the next few minutes. But before we get to these questions and try to understand the Hallel, I would like to have a small introduction to understand the entire principle of Hallel Bichlal, and for that I'm going to share my source sheet here, and hopefully I made it a bit bigger. Yes, it's a little bit bigger. It's Daniela. Yes, good. Mitsuyan. Okay, so let's start just from the first source on the page, which is the Shulchan Aruch. Tells us very clearly, Belel Rishon Shel Pesach, Gomrim Hallel B'tzibur B'ne'ima. Please notice two words that the Shulchan Aruch adds that should not be taken for granted. One is B'tzibur. The word B'tzibur is that it's a din in the public, which is could already answer part of my question before. Is it said b'yichidut? And the second issue, which is fascinating, is ben ni'ima, right? The Shulchan Aruch says you have to sing this Hallel. It's not, to my knowledge, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say this about any other Hallel during the year. Only the night of Pesach, there's a special halacha that you have to sing the Hallel. And he says, of course, bivracha, it's a bracha, full Hallel with a bracha. V'chein bilel shnei yamim. Obviously, in Chutz La'aretz, you say it both nights. The Rama, however, says v'chol ze ein anu noagim ken, ki ein anu omrim balayla b'veit hakneset Hallel klal. The Rama says, no, we don't make this. We don't do this Hallel. It's not done. And as we just argued, this has become the Shulchan Aruch's minhag seems to have become the practice, the general practice of all Jews today here in Eretz Yisrael. And like I said, where does this come from? So before we go into the details, let's understand a little bit more about Bichlal Hallel. What's Bichlal, the idea of Hallel? So the Gemara in Masechet Erchin, you have it here in front of you, says there are 18 days, 18 yamim, she'hayachid. Please notice hayachid, before we spoke about tzibur, if you remember. Here it says, hayachid gomer be'emet Hallel. There are 18 days a year which Hallel is said. Just for the, let's understand that what we call today Chetzi Hallel, like we said today on Rosh Chodesh, is not Hallel. I'm not going to give a shir about this right now. What is the halacha about Chetzi Hallel? You probably remember that Sfardim do not make a bracha on Chetzi Hallel. Ashkenazim do. So for Ashkenazim, we get a little bit confused about, it seems almost the same thing. Rosh Chodesh, Pesach. No, it's not. Chetzi Hallel is not real Hallel. And there's a big question in the Rishonim whether or not to make a bracha on it. But that's not our issue right now. We're going to talk about the days that we say full Hallel, and there are 18 days. And what are they? 8 days of Sukkot, 8 days of Hanukkah, that's 16, Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, 17, and the first day of Shavuot. Obviously, Bagola and Galut, it is 21 days. So, Yom HaAtzmaut is not mentioned here for obvious reasons. But the Gemara says that these are 18 days. And now the Gemara is going to question what is a criteria for us to say Hallel. And the Gemara discusses criterias and reasons, and one of them is, of course, it has to be called a moed, right? And that's why Shabbat is not really called a moed, even though it might be, but whatever. Rosh Chodesh is called a moed, but lo igdish b'asiyat melacha, meaning the criteria has to be called a moed. It has to be a day with Isur Melacha, and why not Rosh Hashanah and Kippur? Well, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur are days where the books of death and life are open. It's not appropriate for us to say Hallel that day. And then the Gemara asks the most important question, in my opinion, which is, wait a second. If you say to me that the factor of Moed, Yom Tov, Isur Melacha is what creates Chiyuv Hallel, so what about Hanukkah? Hanukkah is almost half of the days that we say Hallel. So what are you talking about? There's no Yisur Melacha on Hallel, on Hanukkah. The Gemara answers, the Gemara questions, V'Hanukkah de lo hachi v'lo hachi. It has no Yisur Melacha, it's not a moed, v'kamar, and we say Hallel. The Gemara answers, Mishum Nisa. The Gemara says, you're right. Hanukkah, we don't say Hallel because of Yom Tov. We don't say Hallel on Hanukkah because Yisur Melacha. We say Hallel on Hanukkah because there's a nace, there's a miracle. In other words, the Gemara is saying there are two halachas of Hallel, or there are two types of Hallel. There's Hallel midin Yom Tov, and there's Hallel mishum Nisa. And these are two different types of Hallel. You're right, the words are the same, but the Hallel is different. And now, of course, the Gemara is going to ask, wait a second, if that's true, so why didn't we say on Purim? Purim is also a day that happens, a miracle. And then the Gemara explains the famous answers that the miracles on Purim weren't exactly the same, etc., etc. In other words, the Gemara is not only looking for criteria for what makes Hallel midin Yom Tov, but it's also looking for criteria, what is Hallel ala nes? What is the definition of nes? When we say a miracle, any miracle receives Hallel? The Gemara says no. A miracle in Chutz La'aretz doesn't get Hallel, for example. That's why Purim doesn't get Hallel because it happened in Chutz La'aretz. The Gemara says Hallel that didn't end with the El lived happily ever after, like it happened in Purim, doesn't get Hallel. So I'm not going to go now into all this discussions, but it seems very clear that there are two types of Hallel, and there are criteria. What's a Yom Tov? And there's a criteria for what is an ace. And these are the two types of Hallel. Now, what's the difference between them? Okay, two different Hallels. So before we look into the nafkaminas, the difference between them, I want to ask a more basic question, which I didn't yet, which I should have, which is, what is the halachic source of saying Hallel? The Gemara says that there are two types of Hallel. But wait a second. What is the source in the Torah that teaches us that you have to say Hallel? Where does that come from? So this is the machloket Rishonim between the Rambam and the Ramban, which is a very, very important machloket. In Sefer HaShorashim, in the Rambam's Shorashim, in Sefer HaMitzvot, where he gives all the different criteria for what he decides is a mitzvah and what he decides is not a mitzvah, in the 14 principles, he argues there, the Rambam argues, that Hallel is the Rabbanan. There is no biblical source for us to say Hallel. And the Ramban there in his commentary on the Rambam disagrees. And the Ramban says, no, Hallel is a din d'oraita. It's a mitzvah d'oraita to say Hallel. Of course, the question is, where does he get it from? What's the source? So the Ramban suggests two suggestions. One is that perhaps it's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. It's a traditional d'oraita. So, it's very hard to argue with such a source. But the Ramban also suggests that it's based upon the pasuk in the Torah, Sefer Bamidbar, that teaches us that b'yom simchatchem v'modechem utka'atem b'chatzotzot v'ariotem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem usmachtem. The Torah says that we are supposed to blow the trumpets before God on days of simcha, on days of tzarot. There's a special variotem v'nizkartem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. The Ramban seems to understand that part of that those psukim include the chovah, the obligation to say Hallel, and that's perhaps the d'oraita chiyuv. Now, why is that important? Because that source seems to argue very clearly that only Hallel midin Yom Tov is d'oraita. Because the Ramban quotes psukim that talk about ubiyom simat b'moadeichem, in the days of your festivals. On the day of a festival, the Torah says you should say Hallel. But that would mean that according to the Ramban, perhaps Hallel Anes is not d'oraita. Because, he doesn't say anything about that, but it's not very clear if that would be a chiyuv d'oraita. Now, the Rambam, we said before, argued as the Rabbanan. However, if I were to ask, in the Rambam's opinion, what is the default Hallel? And I'll explain what I mean. According to the Ramban, it would seem fair to argue that according to the Ramban, if I were able to ask the Ramban, maybe we should do an AI, but ask the Ramban, what is the real Hallel? What's the default Hallel? I think it's very clear that the Ramban would say that the real Hallel is Hallel midin Yom Tov. That's the Hallel mid'oraita. And then there's also a halal anes. But would the Rambam agree to that? I think not. And where is my proof? Because, and this is a great question. If anyone wants to yell out the first thing that comes to their mind, I'm happy to hear. Where does the Rambam bring down Hilchot Hallel? Or in other words, where should he bring it down? Where would you think that the Rambam would bring down Hilchot Hallel? The answer would be, your first instinct, I think, of many would be Hilchot Tfilah, maybe Hilchot Yom Tov, maybe Hilchot Pesach is the first Yom Tov, and all the answers above are wrong. The Rambam brings down Hilchot Hallel in Hilchot Chanukah, which might indicate, based upon context, of course, that the Rambam thought that the real Hallel is Halal Anes. That is a kind of par excellence of Hallel. That is like the default type of Hallel. When a miracle occurs, we say Hodah and Shevach to Kadosh Baruch Hu. But it could be that the Hallel Yom Tov is the secondary, is the next type of Hallel. Tov, you could argue with what I just said now, but I think context here, and especially as we know in the Rambam, context is very important, where the Rambam decides where to put which halacha. So it could be that we have here an extreme machloket between the Rishonim, which is the more important Hallel, which is the default Hallel, but I think we can stay with at least the conclusion that we have two types of Hallel. Going back to my question before, what's the big nafkamina? So here I'll give you one very, very basic nafkamina, which is very practical to us for Pesach, and this is a Tosfot in Masechet Sukkah. It's in front of you. It should be on your sheet right now. Tosfot in Sukkah, Daf Lamed Chet. Based upon the Gemara there, the Gemara explains that normally women are pater from Hallel. Why women pater from Hallel? Because the time-bound mitzvah. Women are pater from all time-bound mitzvah. Now, according to what we said now, it's very simple what Tosfot is about to say. Which Hallel are women pater from? Time-bound mitzvah Hallel are only the Hallels of Yom Tov. On Sukkot, on Shavuot, women are pater. But Hallel Anes, women are chayav. Why? Because we have a principle, we have a rule of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Nashim chayavot in Arba Kosot, in Chanukah candles and Megillah, ki afen hayu be'oto hanes. So it's not that far-fetched to argue that women should be chayiv on the Hallel Alanes because they were involved in the miracle that the Hallel was made for that miracle. So any mitzvah that was created to remember or to relive a miracle, women are chayav just like men, which brings Tosfot to the conclusion that of all the Hallels during the year, mashma mikan the isha ptura malil Sukkot v'chein atzeret because mitzvah she'azman grama, but Hallel b'leil psachim is to do with arba kosot, and therefore women are chayiv. Afkan ayubato anes. So women are chayiv on Hallel of night of Pesach because the Hallel of Pesach is on the fourth cup, and the fourth cup women are chayiv ki afhen ayubato anes. So it's all connected, and women are chayiv. So that's one very important nafkamina that we have between Hallel Medin Yom Tov and Hallel Medin Alanes. After we did that introduction, now let's ask our question. The night of Pesach, we said, the Shulchan Aruch says we say Hallel at Shul, and we say Hallel at the Seder night. What are those Hallels? Are they Hallel Medin Yom Tov? Are they Hallel Medin Nes? So the Tosfot just said that a night of Pesach, it's Hallel Nes. But here's my question. Which one? The one at Marv or the one at the Seder night? Which one is Hallel Nes? And of course, the nafkamina would be specifically women right now, right? If we say Hallel Nes is Hallel that we say at Shul, then a woman that doesn't go to Shul, should she make a bracha on Hallel at night if she doesn't go to Shul? According to what we just said now, that's a very, by the way, very practical question. It's not even like weird question, like, oh, I found a weird nafkamina. It's actually a very, very practical nafkamina that should be based upon our question. So before I try to give an answer, I want to bring a third option, and maybe even a fourth option of why we say Hal the night of Pesach. So the I don't think I gave you this on your sheet, but I will. There's a Bavli and a Yusham. I gave you the I did put on the sheet the Bavli here, and from Psachim. Maybe I should have brought down the Yerushalmi as well, which is a bit more clear. But if you look at in front of you, you'll see that there are two sources that I'm highlighting right now. One is from Masechet Sofrim. Masechet Sofrim is a Tanaik source. It's like Mishnayot, and in it we find an addition to our Gemara. Here it says that there are again 18 days that we say Hallel, but here the Tanaik source adds Vilayla Echad Yachid Gomer Ben Hallel. So here again, look at the word Yachid. Yachid is referring to the Hallel, and there is one night, and what is that? Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach Veleilo. The night of Pesach, we say Hallel according to this source, which, if that's really true, then it's quite obvious that the Gemara in Erchin that we quoted before has a machloket with this source, correct? Meaning, if you look at this source and it says 18 days and one night, and then you go up to our Gemara in Erchin where it says very similar language, Shmona Esar Yamim She'echid, and it doesn't say Velilo. So there are two possibilities. One is there's like a different girsa, which might be a different girsa, but it's also a possibility that basically our Gemara Masechet Erchin is arguing directly with Masechet Sofrim whether or not this is true, that there's a night that we say Hallel. But even if that's true, I'll tell you what confuses me every time I give a share about this or talk about this, which is, wait a second, so this Laila is referring to what? Leila Seder or to Mariv, what we do at Mariv? Which Hallel is referring to? The Masechet Sofrim was referring to Hallel at Shul or at B'tzibur or B'yachid at night at the Seder. What's going on here? Because don't forget that we don't say a bracha on the Hallel and the Seder. And according to this, it's a bracha. We should say it's Hallel with a bracha. And that's what we do at Shul. So it seems that what we do today is actually, this Masechet Sofrim is as if talking about Shul Hallel and not the Hallel at the night of Seder, and yet everyone focuses more on the night of Seder Hallel, which is the real Hallel. So it is a little bit confusing, which therefore we can suggest the following. We can suggest that perhaps there are another reason or two why we could say Hallel the night of Pesach, and that has to do maybe with Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach, the Gemara here in Masechet Pesachim, it's a Mishnah that says, what's the difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? Bringing the Korban Pesach on Pesach, or bringing the Korban Pesach, what we call Pesach Sheni in Iyar, for those who didn't bring it, is whether or not you say Hallel when you make the Korban. So there's a halacha that when you, at the Beit HaMikdash, when they would do the Korban Pesach, they would say Hallel, but it also says that Ta'un Hallel ba'achilato, that when you eat the Korban Pesach, you also have to say Hallel. Nane Milei, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon Tzedek, Amar, it's a pasuk in Yeshayahu, when Sancheriv left Yerushalayim and in the days of Chizkiyahu and Am Yisrael, a miracle occurred and the Syrians ran away around 700 BC, then the pasuk in Yeshayahu says that we have to say Shira, we have to say Hallel for this miracle. Shir yeh lachem keleil hitkadesh chag. And the Gemara learns Laila hamikudash lechag ta'un alel. That a night that has kedushat chag requires Hallel, and the Yerushalmi, which I didn't bring to you, seems to understand from this pasuk that the night of Pesach requires Hallel. Now, why? One suggestion is as we'll soon see, I'll try to explain it one way, but it could be that it's connected to Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, we said, is a mitzvah that you bring to the Beit Hamikdash. You say Hallel. Could be that the Hallel that we say nowadays is some kind of zecher to the Korban Pesach that we say. If that's true, that makes more sense to be the Hallel at the Seder night rather than the Hallel at Mariv. And therefore, I want to suggest the following. And I actually I'm quite I'm quite I was quite tickled in a good way to find that last night when after preparing shir, I actually found this in the shir of Rav Soloveitchik. I assumed that I once learned it and I just forgot it, and then I thought about it again. But in one of the yahrzeit shir of the Rav says exactly the following, and I'll explain what he says. The Rav quotes his father of Moshe, who believed in saying Hallel the night of Pesach, and that's a little bit unusual if you think about it, because again, in Ashkenazi Jews, it wasn't always common to say Hallel in Chutz La'aretz, and yet the Briskers apparently, as well as Hasidim, by the way, did say Hallel the night of Pesach. But the question is really why. So the Rav explains like this. The Rav says that the two Hallels that we just spoke about, Hal Midin Yom Tov, Hal Midines, both apply the night of Pesach. The Hallel that we say at Shul is Hal Midin Yom Tov, and the Hallel we say at the Seder night is Hal Alanes. He doesn't really say that exactly. I'll finesse it a bit in a few minutes. But Begadol, the two types of Hal that we spoke about until now are really done at night. And I think if we go down this route, whatever way you speak, I think that it could really explain something very, very powerful about the night of Pesach. Because the night of Pesach is unique and different than any other night of the year. Because in the world of Yom Tov is a daytime idea. Simchat Yom Tov, the idea of a Yom Tov is a daytime. I'll prove it to you. For example, Lulav Arba Minim is taking the daytime. Shofar is blown in the daytime. The mitzvot are usually are a din in the day. Someone's going to say to me, wait a second, eating a sukkah at night is a mitzvah d'oraita. And what, of course, will I answer to them? Where do we learn that from? From Pesach, right? We learn that from Pesach. The source of eating bread in a sukkah the night of Sukkot is not halacha itself. It's learned from Pesach. And Pesach is the night of Pesach is a unique idea. In other words, it's as if a Yom Tov of itself. As if we're saying that because Hallel is said on Yom Tov, so we say in the morning of Pesach, like we say the morning of Sukkot, like we say the morning of Shavuos. But because the night of Pesach is its own Yom Tov, so we say a special Hallel, Midin Yom Tov. And that's why it's so different than any other Chag that we don't say at night, because it's a special Yom Tov. Now, could it be that the special, unique idea of Yom Tov at night is because of Korban Pesach? Could very well be. Meaning, I don't necessarily need to say that it's different answer. It could be that part of the characteristics and uniqueness of the night of Pesach is the Korban Pesach, which is eaten at night. That makes it a special Yom Tov, and that requires its own Hallel. And I want to prove this point from a Tosfot in a Tosfot in Masechet Pesachim. There's a Gemara in Masechet Pesachim that talks about the chiyuv of the 4 cups of wine, and the Gemara discusses what happens if a person doesn't drink good wine. Gemara required yain mazug, and the Gemara says yain mazug is that you have to put some water in the wine because it's too difficult to drink. So the Gemara says that you have to make sure that the wine that you drink is good wine, and if you don't, lo yatsa yedei chirut, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of freedom. And Tosfot points out, what is this idea of freedom? Tosfot says there's a special halacha the night of Pesach to drink wine. Why? Mishum simchat Yom Tov. And everyone asks, what are you talking about? Simchas Yom Tov of eating and drinking only applies in the day of Yom Tov. There is no, the Achronim say, there's no such idea. We don't have a chiyuv of drinking at night wine. Tosfot says, yes, we do. Part of what we fulfill by drinking wine in Arba Kosot, says Tosfot, is the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. According to what we're saying right now, that makes sense. Usually, Simchas Yom Tov is a din in the daytime, but the night of Pesach has its own category of a Yom Tov. It's a Yom Tov of itself, and that would require us to say our own Hallel. However, later on at night, when we get to the Seder, we have another Hallel. What Hallel is that? That's the Hallel that the Gemara was talking about, Midin Hallel Anes. That's the Hallel Anes that we have to say because of the miracle that we are reliving the night of Pesach. So I think that's a really to me it's a more of a misudar way, right? It's or just a bit organized way to understand what we say the night of Pesach and why we say it. But I want to get a little bit more deeper into this based upon what Rav Soloveitchik said. My Abba Alav Shalom pointed out that in the Brisker family, it wasn't so clear to all whether or not you should say Hallel in Shul the night of Pesach. In fact, Rav Schechter in his book Nefesh Harav, where he quotes stories about Rav Soloveitchik, points out that there's a newspaper clipping from Yated Ne'eman, which by definition you can't really believe, says that Reb Chaim did not believe in saying Hallel night of Pesach, while in this book that I'm holding in front of me, in Rav Soloveitchik's Shirim Zecher Avi Mori, he points out that his father of Moshe did say Hallel, and I would trust Rav Soloveitchik more than Yated Ne'eman. But in a book that I have on my desk here called Halichot Hagrach, this is the book of only for Brisker fans that tells us the halachas and minhagim of Reb Chaim, a bit similar to Ma'aser of the Gra. And in this book, it actually says that Reb Chaim was a big believer in saying Hallel the night of Pesach. He really believed that it was important. And again, I have to explain that this was a machloket between different shuls. I just read online about a shul that they took the rabbi to Din Torah because he said Hallel the night of Pesach. Mamash, unbelievable. People have what to fight about. But it says in this book, believe it or not, that Reb Chaim's son, the Brisker Rav, used to walk out of shul when his father Reb Chaim said Hallel. And he walked out of shul with Rabbi Simcha Zelig Rieger, the Rav of Brisk. Those who know basketball know that his grandson Simi Rieger. You ever heard Simi Rieger, the basketball NBA guy? Anyway, Rav Simcha Zelig Rieger, the Rav of Brisk, and it says here in the footnote that he would walk out with a grizz. So my father explained, when you read that, you might think, oh, the grizz was against it. No. You have to understand the Brisker family. It could be that the Brisker Rav really agreed that you should say Hallel, but he thought it was Hallel B'tzibur. The Shulchan Aruch says B'tzibur. So it's a din on the tzibur, not a din on the yachid. And therefore he thought, okay, let the tzibur say Hallel. I'm going to go outside to learn Torah. The community can say Hallel. I'll go out with Rabbi Rieger and we'll go talk Torah. It sounds a bit funny, but it seems that's what it says. However, if that's really true, then I have a big question on what I just said now. And I'm going to ruin what I just said now, or at least question what I just said now. Again, remember that the Shulchan Aruch says it's a din b'tzibur, that it's a din in b'tzibur. If I would be correct what I'm saying, or I mean Rav Soloveitchik is saying it, then the question is, so it should be on the yachid. Then everyone should be saying Hallel the night of Pesach, even if you're not in shul. If it's a din Hallel Yom Tov, everyone agrees that you say Hallel if you don't go to shul Hallel in the morning of Pesach, or Hallel if you don't go to shul the morning of Shavuos to shul. Everyone agrees you say Hallel the bracha. But here the Shulchan Aruch actually said it's a din b'tzibur. which therefore can have a question what I just said. And actually, the Gra seemed to understand this halacha of saying Hallel the night of Pesach is not Hallel midin Yom Tov, but rather Hallel midin Nes, midin Hallel ala Nes. And what's his proof? It's brilliant. And the truth is, it's hard to argue with the Gra, even though I like Rav Soloveitchik's idea better. The Gra says this is similar to lighting Hanukkah candles in a Beit Knesset. We all know that we have a minhag to light Hanukkah candles in a shul. Now, that's a din in a shul, or is it din betzibur? I think I once gave a shir about this, and I'm not sure to remember. But there's a very famous machloket in the poskim if lighting Hanukkah candles in a shul is a din bebeit knesset or a din betzibur. What's nafkamina? Nafkamina is, can you light in a wedding hall? Should you light in the wedding hall? If it's a din bebeit knesset, then no. If it's a din betzibur, then yes. So some people say, to answer this question, make sure you daven mariv in the wedding hall, and then you can light Hanukkah candles. People somehow suggest that you do that, turn your wedding hall into a shul as if, and then din betzibur b'tfila, you can do it. But the Gra seems to say that the reason why we say Hallel the night of Pesach in shul is because Pirsuma Nisa B'tzibur has a special element that it's added by the fact that the community is together, just like Hanukkah candles has a special Pirsuma Nisa that we do in a shul. And if that would be true, then another possibility would be that the Hallel in shul is Hallel midin halanes. And of course, the nafkamina between these two explanations is, going back to my original question, whether or not a woman who doesn't go to shul should be saying Hallel. If it's Hallel midin Yom Tov, like I suggested before, then surely a woman at home should be saying Hallel by herself. But if it's Hallel midin, midin Yom Tov, she should not be saying, because a woman is pater from Yom Tov. But if it's Hallel ala Nes, like Rav Soloveitchik suggested, then she shouldn't be saying it either, because it's a din bitzibur and not biyachid, so it won't make much of a difference. However, and this is fascinating, Rav Ovadia, in a tshuva Nichavedas, says that women that don't go to shul the night of Pesach should say Hallel with a bracha at night, which seems to argue that it's somehow a combination, according to him, between Hallel Yom Tov, Hallel Nes. It's Hallel that women are chayav in, because they're chayav in all the mitzvot of Pesach, perhaps. But there's a different ways of understanding this. I suggested before another question which could be connected to our question, which is, can you daven Marv early? Can you say Hallel early? Here again, you could argue that if this Hallel is more din ala Nes, then perhaps the same way we have to wait for Kiddush and everything else when it gets dark, then perhaps we should wait till it's dark. But if you say it's more din Yom Tov, then theoretically you should be able to say it before Tzeta Kochavim. So, like I said before, these questions that I asked could be nafkaminas that indicate to us what is the characteristics of this Hallel. However, I want to end the shir by going a bit more deeper into what Rav Soloveitchik said before about the Hallel that we say at the Seder, and maybe this will also reflect on the Hallel that we say in Mariv. I'm just going to go here. The Tur tells us, and you can see it on your sheet here, tells us that there's a lot of different opinions whether or not you say Hallel the bracha the night of Pesach. He brings here a few opinions. One is the Ritzvah Haya Mivarech Alav Shnei Pa'amim. Achat Kodem Achila ve'achat Achar Achila. Not only did he make a bracha, but he made two brachas. V'chen Haya Noeg Marami Rotenberg. The Ritz Geyat, the Aviad, that's the Ravya, Katvu She'ein Levarech Alav Klal. That's our minhag, by the way. Night of Pesach, at the Seder, we don't make a bracha at all. Lefi shechokim oto lishnayim, lifnei seuda ulachareh. Like we said before, because of the hefsek. And he says, "V'im ken ha'achi varchu kivan sheposkim." We said already, but that doesn't explain to us the Domek Hefsek. Why it's so important? So we'll have to maybe answer that in a minute. And then he brings a minhag. Yesh mekomot שנוהגים לקרות הלל בבית הכנסת בציבור, כדי שלא יצטרכו לברך עליו בשעת ההגדה. Oh, so according to the tour, it brings everything together according to the minhag. The minhag, he said, it wasn't very clear whether you make a bracha or not. This Hallel is such a strange Hallel to say at night, to say in the Seder. So they made another Hallel before, and because once they made that Hallel before and you make a bracha there, then you don't have to make a bracha the night of the Seder, as if to suggest that you're somehow fulfilling both mitzvot of Hallel midin Yom Tov, midin Alanes, by saying the first Hallel you covered yourself with Hallel with a bracha, so you don't have to say another Hallel with a bracha. You don't have to make another bracha at the end. That could be somehow an explanation to why, to the different kind of development of the minhagim that we do, that we don't make a bracha on the second Hallel. However, to be fair, there's a very, very important. I'm just skipping a little bit. The Ran quotes a world famous opinion of Rabbi Gaon, who really explained why we don't make a bracha the night of Pesach of the Hallel. He says, "Ein mivachim Hallel Pesach she'ein anu korim oto b'torat korin ela b'torat shira." According to Rabbi Gaon, going back to what we said before, the whole idea of Hallel at night is strange. The Hallel of Pesach is unique and cannot be compared, perhaps not to Hallel Midin Yom Tov, and not even Hallel Anes. It may be a third Av Tipus of Hallel. And this Hallel is B'Torat Shira. And what does that mean? There are different ways of how you understand this idea of Shira, of pray, of singing. But I'll say this, and this is what's amazing. As I mentioned in the introduction, many people think that the fact that we don't say a bracha on Hallel the night of Pesach proves that it's not a real Hallel. Rav Hai Gaon is telling us exactly the opposite. Dafka, the fact that we don't make a bracha on Hallel shows the uniqueness of this Hallel, that this might be the greatest Hallel of all, in which one doesn't require a commandment from God to say it. Because at the end of the day, a bracha, if you think about it, when we say Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher Hashem tzav v'tzivanu, when we as if make a statement that the reason for what we're doing right now is a tzivui from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that as if belittles, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but almost belittles what we're doing. Because look, without the tzivui, I wouldn't have done it. The night of Pesach, when we leave Egypt, and we're actually reliving the Yetziat Mitzrayim, a person doesn't require any external commandment why he has to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say Shira before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is a natural, instinct way of thanking and saying praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way, perhaps, this is perhaps why the Hallel the night of Pesach is so different than any other Hallel, because it's real, it's live, it's happening right now. And that's why we don't say bracha. Perhaps that's why we say part of the meal. We say before and after. The whole meal becomes into an evening of Shira, of praise to God. We're not just eating another meal, we're eating what we call a Sudat Hoda'ah. Part of when we sing in a meal, so we turn the whole meal into a special event. We're not just eating for the sake of Yom Tov. Part of the eating is Suda Voda'ah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that He took us out of Egypt. And if that's really true, then it could really be that the night of Pesach Hallel is so different and so strange, and in fact, a little bit balagan, right? According to what we said now, we're not very clear what it is, because it really It really is a different night than any other time of the year. It's unique characteristics of being a Yom Tov at night, of Korban Pesach, and a miracle and Mitzat Mitzrayim really requires a special types of Hallel. We cover ourselves with Hallel Midin Yom Tov, Hallel Anes. We're not sure. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's either. But it really is different than any other rules throughout the year. Rabbi Soloveitchik, by the way, and with that, I'll probably end. Rav Soloveitchik says it's more than that. Rav Soloveitchik points out that the reason why there's no Hallel at night with a bracha is because the Hallel at the Seder night is part of the mitzvah of Sipur Yitziat Mitzrayim. In the Briskers, this is the way I was brought up. My father always used to start the Haggadah with the question, what is the unique mitzvah of Sipur Yitziat Mitzrayim that's different than the mitzvah of Zachor? I didn't realize that it says in the books that the Reb Chaim of Brisk used to begin his Haggadah with that question also. I guess that's where my father got it from. And we would explain the night of Pesach during our Seder growing up, what's the unique mitzvah of Sipur that's different than the mitzvah of Zichira that we do every day. The Rav developed this idea very much. Rav Soloveitchik developed this idea very much. And amongst other explanations, he said that the mitzvah of Sipur requires, as part of the mitzvah, to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lefichach anu chayavim lehodot. Lefichach, the word lefichach, as if connects the Hallel to the Magid. And then the Rav says, well, we don't make a bracha for Magid, which is a question of itself, that the Rishonim argued, why is there no bracha for Magid? And that's a famous discussion in a shir of itself. But once we conclude that there's no bracha for Magid, then there's no bracha for Hallel, because Hallel is part of Magid. And therefore the Rav says that's why we don't say Hallel with a bracha at the night of Pesach. Going back to what the Rav said, he said, then at Shul, the Rav says we really say the Hallel Midin Yom Tov, it's a special Yom Tov. At night, the Hallel that we say is part of the Haggadah, part of the Nes of the Sipur Yitziat Mitzrayim. So it's a little bit like Hallel Nes, but not really. It's a special Hallel of the mitzvah of Sipur Yitziat Mitzrayim, which could explain differently what Rav Hai Gaon just said, maybe in a different way. So to conclude, our shir today, I know I didn't answer necessarily my questions in a very, very clear way regarding women and yichidim. There are different opinions. I know that many people paskin that if you don't go to shul at night for Pesach, that you should not say Hallel bracha. That is a common psak. As I said, Rav Avadia disagrees. Rav Avadia says that you should say it even by yourself, even not at shul. But if I'm not mistaken, the common psak of the Ashkenazi world is not to say it unless you're in shul. But what I really tried to understand is what is what is behind these two very strange and different and unique Hallels that we say at night. We try to suggest that they are they symbolize the two types of Hallel that we say during the year, but at night of Pesach they both come together. Hallel Midin Yom Tov, Hallel Midin Hallel Alanes. Those of you, I'm sure some of you, as Mashir was going on, thought to themselves, wait a second, those who don't say Hallel the bracha on Yom HaAtzmaut, does that mean that they are take it Hallel to a higher level than saying it with a bracha? Because perhaps we just proved tonight that maybe the best kind of Hallel is a Hallel without a bracha, because it's spontaneous, it's instinct, it's kind of very natural, and and that's maybe why people don't say Hallel with a bracha. I don't think so, but I'm just throwing that out there to remember that Hallel without a bracha, according to this, really might be the highest level of a Hallel. But that, of course, would be a discussion for another time. The Hallel of Yom HaAtzmaut. I have 2 minutes to the end, and if anyone has questions, I'm sorry I didn't follow the chat boxes. I apologize. I'm just going to, if anyone has what to ask or to please use the opportunity now to shout out. I'm just looking at the chat. Um, okay, no, yeah, there were no questions in the chat, but if anyone has בבקשה, something to say or question,
The the Gemara statement, Gadol hametzuva v'osa me'eno metzuva v'osa.
yeah,
Seems to contradict this.
yeah, I agree, and yet I think that this is not necessarily the same idea. Meaning, we might be commanded, but by not saying we're commanded, as if we're don't forget a bracha is only to Rabbanan. So perhaps here we are mitzvah, but we're not announcing it. There's a beautiful Sri Esh. The Sri Esh explains why there's no bracha on mishloach manot on Purim, because he says that we don't want to limit mishloach manot to be a mitzvah only because we want to do it out of our own heart. We want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons, not only because we're commanded. So I think there's what to talk about what you said, Larry. I agree to some degree, but I think that some places Rav Amital used to explain why there's no mitzvah, why there's no bracha on tzedakah. He said. Rav Mital said, used to say, because, a similar idea, some things need to come from, we know it's a mitzvah, we know God commanded us, but we want to sometimes also, make a statement as if that we're doing it also because we think it's the right thing to do. But I hear what you're saying. That's for sure a good something to think about. בסדר, דניאלה, אני גומר בזמן, נכון? 10:15.